Hello again, everyone. Today we're going to talk about giving and receiving. In Japanese, there are three main words that we use to talk about giving and receiving. The first one is ageru, which is a ru verb. The next one is kureru, which is also a ru verb. And the last one is morao, which of course is an u verb. We can use kanji to write these words. In fact, if you were to check a Japanese English dictionary, they all have a combination of kanji and hiragana that can be used to write them. But generally, when they're used in Japanese, they're actually written purely in hiragana. So that first word, ageru, this word is used to talk about giving something to someone else, that is, someone other than yourself. You can talk about you giving something to someone else, or you can talk about someone else giving something to someone else. So, for example, I could say, Watashi no kudamono o Michiko ni agemashita. And that would mean, I gave my fruit to Michiko. And that new word there, kudamono, means fruit. I could also say, Donarudo wa Sayako ni hana o ageta, which would mean, Donald gave Sayako a flower. That new word, hana, means flower. Our next word, kureru, is used to talk about someone else giving something to you. Whenever we use this word, the speaker is the recipient of the item in question. So if I said, Keishigomu o kurete kudasai, that would mean, please give me an eraser. Gomu means gum or rubber. You can tell it's an English loan word. Gomu, gum. Yeah. Keishigomu means eraser. You'll remember from our last lesson about transitive and intransitive verbs that kesu means to turn off or to erase. So that's where that comes from. If I were to say, Muku wa kare no ringo o kureta, that would mean Muku gave me his apple. Kare means he or him. It can also mean boyfriend. Kare no means his. Kanojo means she or her and can also mean girlfriend. Kanojo no means her, the possessive form of her, not the pronoun form, or hers. And the last of the three words we use to talk about giving and receiving is morao. This is used to talk about receiving something. We can talk about ourselves receiving, or we can talk about someone else receiving. So if I said, presento o moratta, that would mean I got a present. If I said, Jimu wa kuroba kara kado o moraimashita, that would mean Jim received a card from Clover. That new word, kado, means card. Now that we've learned the basics of giving and receiving, we're going to talk about doing favors. We can combine the te form with ageru, kureru, and morao to talk about doing or receiving a favor. For example, if I said, Jun senpai wa ocha o sukutte kuremashita, that would mean my senior Jun made tea for me. We combine the te form of sukuru, to make, and kureru to get tsukutte kuremashita, which means to made for me. That new word, senpai, means senior or older student. And when I say senior, that's not like senior citizen. It means someone who is senior to you in any kind of organization. So someone who has worked a job longer than you and is your superior, you would call senpai. Someone who is ahead of you, let's say in your judo or karate class, could be your senpai. Someone who is of a higher grade level than you could also be your senpai. The reverse of that is the word kohai, which means junior or younger student. Now, if I were to say, Ototo ni konsato no kippu o katte ageta, that would mean I bought concert tickets for my little brother. Once again, we're combining the te form of kao, to buy, with ageru, to get katte ageta, bought for someone else. Now that first new word, ototo, means little brother. Imoto means little sister. Konsato means concert. And kippu means ticket. And if I were to say, Nii-san ni konsato no kippu o katte moratta, that would mean I had my older brother buy me a concert ticket. Again, we're combining the te form of kao, to buy, but this time we're combining it with morao, to get katte moratta. I had someone buy something for me. So we introduced another new word there, Nii-san, but before we get into that, I'm going to show you the word ani, which means older brother. Now the word that I used, Nii-san, uses the same kanji as ani because it means the same thing, older brother. Ani, at least in my experience, is a little bit more detached. It's what you might be more likely to use if you're talking about someone else's older brother, although you can still use it to talk about your own older brother. Similarly, ane means older sister. But we can also use the word nee-san, which also means older sister. So next, we're going to take a quick look at how to make requests in Japanese. So I want you to imagine that you've just written a story and you walk up to maybe your friend, maybe a parent, and whoever they are, you want them to read the story for you. And think about how you would go about asking them to do that. We could say, Boku no hanashi o yonde, read my story. But as you can imagine, that is incredibly impolite. You're telling someone to do something instead of asking them, in spite of the fact that you're really the only one who benefits from that. So it's kind of doubly impolite in that sense. Now, something that would be a little bit more polite is to say, Boku no hanashi o yonde kudasai. Please read my story. But even when you say this, you are still kind of giving a command. You're adding please to the end of it, but you are still telling somebody to do something instead of asking them. Instead, what we can do is we can use the te form of a verb combined with a number of different forms of kureru. But this time we would use kureru to make a question sentence instead of a statement. The different forms that we can use include kureru and kurenai, which are both casual. You would use these more with someone you're very familiar with. Someone who's of the same social status as you as well. You know, maybe a friend, a classmate, probably not something that you would say to your boss. We can also use kuremaska and kuremasenka, which are more formal. So we could say, Boku no hanashi o yonde kureru? This would mean, can you read my story for me? Again, this is making a request, but it is quite informal. This is something that you would probably say to a friend, maybe a family member. A more polite sentence would be, Boku no hanashi o yonde kurenai? Won't you read my story for me if you can? This one, again, is a bit more polite. You'll notice that instead of keeping the verb in its infinitive form or its dictionary form, we turn it to its nai form. Nai, when we use the nai form, that literally is the negative short form of a verb, but we can also use it with rising intonation to make a question. Like the example I gave for the English translation of this, won't you read my story for me? There, we're literally saying won't, will not, but it's understood that what we're actually doing is making a request. It's a similar case in Japanese. Now, for our next sentence, we're going to get more polite, and instead of using short form, we are actually going to use our formal form or desmas form and say, Boku no hanashi o yonde kuremasu ka? Would you read my story for me? And if we wanted to be even more polite than that, we could say, Boku no hanashi o yonde kuremasen ka? Would you read my story for me if you can? The last thing we're going to learn about today is how to talk about lending and borrowing in Japanese. So to talk about lending and borrowing, we can either use the verb kasu, to lend, or kariru, to borrow, and kariru is a ru verb. So if I were to say, 500 yen o kashite kuremasu ka? That would mean, would you lend me 500 yen? You can see I'm combining the te form of kasu with kuremasu ka to make a polite request for a loan. If I said, Rumiko-chan ni terebi geimu o kashita, that would mean I lent Rumiko a video game. That new word, terebi geimu, means video game. We're combining the word for television and the word for game. I could also create a sentence with pretty much the same meaning by saying, Rumiko-chan ni terebi geimu o kashite ageta. Instead of just using kasu, I've combined the te form of kasu with ageru to make kashite ageta. If I were to say, Anata no jacketto o karite mo ii desu ka? That would mean, may I borrow your jacket? I'm using the te form of kariru to make a sentence with te mo ii desu ka, to ask permission to do something, in this case, to borrow a jacket. And that new word, jacketto, means jacket. That's all of the new grammar for today, but before we move on to our practice sentences, I'm going to introduce some new vocabulary. So our first word is chichi, which means father. Using that same kanji, we can make the word to-san, which means father as well. Again, as with ani, ane versus ni-san and ne-san, chichi is a bit more detached, although you can certainly use it to refer to your own father. I should mention with each of these that while I've used the honorific san at the end, it is not unheard of, especially when you're talking about your brother or sister, to use chan instead, or to even, in certain situations, use sama, although that's fairly rare when you're talking about members of your own family. Haha means mother. And using the same kanji, we can make the word ka-san, which means mother as well. Continuing in that same vein, the word ryoshin means parents. Our next word, koinu, means puppy. Now, you'll remember that the word inu means dog. Ko means child. So this word is literally child dog, koinu. Similarly, the word koneko means kitten. Keitai means cell phone. We can also say keitai denwa. It means the same thing, but it's understood that if you say keitai, you're talking about a cell phone without you having to add the word denwa for phone to the end of it. Pan means bread, and those of you who have taken Spanish before would know that pan is the Spanish word for bread. And yes, this is a Spanish loan word in Japanese. Aisu, or aisukurimu, means ice cream. And our last word, boru pen, means ballpoint pen. Now that we've finished with our grammar and vocabulary, we're going to practice making some sentences. Our first sentence is, my father bought me a cell phone. And this is going to be formal. To-san wa keitai o katte kuremashita. Kanon made Jackie a bento, and this is going to be informal. You'll remember, by the way, that a bento is a Japanese-style lunchbox. Kanon wa Chiaki ni bento o tsukutte ageta. Yuzu got a puppy from her parents, and this is going to be informal as well. Yuzu wa ryoshin kara koinu o moratta. Give your little sister some bread. Anata no imoto ni pan o agete. Please give me some ice cream. Aisu o kurete kudasai. And of course, we could also say aisu kurimu. I made a movie. Would you watch it for me if you can? And this is going to be formal. Eiga o tsukurimashita. Mite kuremasen ka? And our last sentence is, can you lend me your ballpoint pen? And this is going to be informal. Omae no boru pen o kashite kureru. And we could use anata instead of omae, but I thought we would try out that new word we learned for you, especially since this is an informal situation. That's all for this lesson. I will see you in the next one. Ja, mata.